Hello and welcome back to another Reddit League matchcast. Today we have the Division 4 promotion playoff for you, where we'll be watching Lunacy against Solarsensei. And today I'm joined by Bombadil. How are you doing?
Oh, doing very good. Thank you for having me again. Really excited to take a look at this match. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Kind of your matchcast debut here. So hoping you'll have a good time and our viewers will appreciate it as well. And yeah, Lunacy against Solar. They've had pretty interesting seasons, both of them fairly close in reaching the playoffs. Lunacy reaching it by about 200 points total score over Xander in the tiebreaker, and a couple more thousand over Sepkirst in the tiebreaker, all of them on 16 points in a regular season. So a really close one for him. And Solarsensei a point over Ollie in fourth place. Although I think Solar was for most of the season kind of in that second place fighting against Pashtetli, whereas Lunacy I think was more so mid-table for most of it and kind of snuck in there at the end. But for today, they will be playing South Africa, then Lithuania, and then a diverse AI world. And that is exactly the order we'll be showing them to you. So yeah, Bombadil, what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, it should be a tight one, as we discussed before. I do like to see the momentum, how that's going to carry into the playoff matches. As you mentioned, we have two different situations in terms of fighting for maybe the first 1-2 spots and then falling into the playoff bracket, as opposed to fighting midfield and then making it up into the playoffs at the end. So we'll see if that carries through at all, or if it's going to be as close as we imagine it to be, with those scores being around each other going into the final matches here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we'll start with South Africa. Let me actually pull up quickly. During the regular season, um, Lunacy had a pretty decent time in South Africa, scoring about 20k. Solar, not so much, with about 15,000 points. So he'll be hoping to bounce back from that. Yeah, I think we've mentioned enough times what South Africa is like to play in a competitive setting like this, especially with this kind of map as well. Very raw. So we'll hope for the sake of our players that there won't be too many rounds where it just comes down to region guessing or certain factors of luck, perhaps. But yeah, any particular favorites out of the two for this first map, or are you just kind of waiting to see what happens?
Definitely waiting to see what happens. I think between the two of them, a map like South Africa, you'd both expect them to be able to put up pretty strong scores. Kind of as you mentioned, South Africa is one of those feast or famine maps where, for the size of the country, you can get some shockingly good clues. The highway signs are usually pretty well organized in terms of the national layout, but at the same time, you can end up in stretches of road that are seemingly hundreds of miles for anything of use, depending on where you really are. So yeah, if the rounds fall their way and fall favorably, I could see them both getting very strong scores with not much to split them. But if it comes down, like you said, to a region guessing situation where you have to go more on the feel of it than any real good pinpointable clues, that could be a big difference. That could separate them in the end.
Yeah, so let's see what kind of factors will play into this here, as we'll start with round one now. And it does look like at least it's a paved road, so that's a good thing to
Good
start.
start. Yeah. Oh, we've already got a small sign, R34.
Yeah, very helpful. The R roads generally are kind of ordered in a way. They're not the most intuitive, I feel like, but you can usually find them if you spend enough time looking for them. But it does seem like Solo will just, okay, never mind. He is going to try to look for something.
Both of them right away starting to go in and at least get their bearings, try to get the right region that they can start with and work from there.
And Lunacy has found a sign that mentions the border to Free State, which is one of the states or provinces, I guess, in South Africa. So he knows he's somewhere close to that border, but he doesn't necessarily know where exactly. I think it is a state that kind of only really borders into South Africa on like one border, if you know what I mean. I think it's like north you've got
Right.
a different country, or two different countries, and west you've got the coast. So that kind of limits your options. But he has also found another sign giving him distances to towns. I think he's covered it with his map at the moment, so we're not seeing it, but it's there.
Definitely a helpful clue. And I think if, once you can pin down at least where R34 is, that's going to help a lot, having a point of reference to gauge the difference.
Yeah, and Solar has found R34, but he seems to be struggling to find the exact place. He's continuously looking at that Blomhof Dam sign, so presumably near a body of water. There is Blomhof right there on his screen, and I think he possibly may have spotted it, or he's just kind of given up searching at the exact wrong time. But either way,
Right.
he's continuing somewhere.
And you know how it is too. It's so easy with the density of information on the screen to see it and then just fly past it without really acknowledging it.
Yeah, Lunacy at the same time has found Blumhoff pretty much just a couple of seconds after Solar, and he's already in the pinpointing stage. I think he went the opposite direction, so he kind of hit the water, which makes pinpointing a little bit easier for him. Whereas I'm not sure if Solar saw it, he might have, but yeah. I mean, you know, you're near a dam, so obviously you can assume you're near some water, but it obviously helps if you know where exactly that water is.
Yeah, hopefully anyway. It is definitely interesting to see them both choose different directions at the start, which can happen constantly. And fortunately enough, regardless of which way they went, they both got clues for the same highway. So it's just a matter of who got the better information. And it looks like Lunacy got the more favorable clues, at least with the direction he went with initially.
Yeah, and he gets a nice ace to start with. Perfect round for him. Not the easiest section of the road to pinpoint. I'm not expecting 1 point here or there to make a difference anyway, but it could do. Solar has now found the same sign that Lunacy has found earlier, which again tells him of the Free State border, and he's skipped right past Blumhof again. Oh, there we go.
Oh, he's right. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Okay, so he has found it, and yeah, that should, again, give him enough points. He's not quite sure. As I said earlier, I don't think he's seen the water yet, so he's kind of just trying to check and see. I mean, he has seen a sign for the Blumhof Dam, so, I mean, you can probably assume that you're fairly close to it. So I'm not sure why he's going away from the water, but he's got 15 seconds to figure it out.
And like you said, even if it isn't perfect, it's going to be at least in the right area.
Yeah. And 3 more. It's not looking like he'll make it. Ah, unlucky. He placed his pin down at the last second, but too late for the game to register it, and that'll cost him 383 points. I said earlier, a point up and down will probably not matter, but I mean, almost 400 points is quite a lot, I think. But, you know, considering he, I think, pretty much had everything he needed there.
That's harsh, especially for a country as large as South Africa to be in the right area, in the right town, and to just be on the wrong side of it and to lose 400 points off it. Especially with a really good effort at the end to catch up with a minute to go and find a location, just not able to really get the pin down and just in time.
Yeah, I guess a bit unlucky as well how, you know, he had Blumhoff pretty much on his screen after about half a minute, maybe a minute or so, and just didn't spot it and then spent another minute essentially wasting time. Obviously, you know, he couldn't have known since he didn't see it, but none of that was particularly helpful. And if he had just spotted the town early on the map, I'm sure that time could have been, you know, well used to pinpoint the round instead. So a little bit unlucky there in that regard, but it is what it is, and he'll go into the next rounds with a little bit of a disadvantage. All right, then we'll take a look at round 2 now. And again, a paved road, and it seems like they're entering some sort of municipality here, so looks like
a sign right off the bat is nice for both directions, which is convenient. So at least you can see which side on both of them.
Yeah, it can't be too bad. I'm not sure about those signs specifically being super helpful. I've seen them a couple of times around, and you know, those municipalities tend to be fairly small, so you might not be able to find them on a map. But there we go. That's a good sign. And well, would you look at
that? That's about as good a sign as you can get in South Africa for sure.
Yep. 40 kilometers north of Blomhof Dam. Huh. All right.
Oh, sounds familiar, right?
Yeah. A little bit. Can Solar find it? There we go. He's remembered. The bigger problem they have now is that they seem to be on a pretty long straight road. There are a couple of off-roads here and there, but this is not the kind of task you really, you really want, trying to pinpoint on this probably 20-kilometer long straight road.
Exactly. And I think at least the one saving grace is that that sign was available so early in the round that they can devote most of the time to trying to pinpoint it, as opposed to trying to scramble in the last 30 seconds or so to nail it down. So it's still going to be a tough ask to get it exactly, but it looks like they're making good progress. At least Lunacy's off to a pretty good start here.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was kind of looking at that side road going off to the west as well, which seems to have like a pretty distinctive curve. So if that is on the map, it shouldn't be too difficult to find. Of course, that's a big if because, with rural rounds in countries like this, you never know. Solar again, kind of struggling with finding the general region around, like, where he's at. He, placed himself on the 12th for a long time at the beginning there, which, given he saw a sign that literally said R34 here, is kind of interesting. Obviously didn't fit the road direction at all either. So he seems to be, I don't know if it's nerves or something else, but he doesn't seem to be playing at his best, I guess.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell exactly, what's going on in the head, and maybe it's a case where, putting down pins as placeholders and still just trying to think it through while you're looking around is another option too. But we'll see if he can at least put it down into a closer area to what we're looking for.
Yeah, he has put it on the seemingly right road now, although he is still kind of looking elsewhere. From what he's been doing so far, I can only assume that he's not really checking road directions much. As Lunacy gets a nice 5K there, as you could quickly see there, the road did show up, the side road with that distinctive curve, so making the task a lot easier. I don't even want to think about how it would have been if it hadn't showed up. That's not a fun task to do. But yeah, what I was saying is that Solar doesn't seem to be checking road directions much, and I'm not surprised with this new compass that he's using that he's not doing it much, because I mean I still don't understand why anyone uses that. But I mean if he likes it more, sure. But yeah, that seemingly it has cost him a bit of time at least.
I agree, and I think when you're in this kind of situation where you're on a long straight road like we were discussing, and there isn't a whole lot else to really help you narrow it down, and at least now you know what road you're on, and you're confident, which cities you're in between. It really becomes a case where you got to pay close attention to those side roads, and it looks like he's at least starting to put it by junctions and started to get a little closer. Let's see if we can get in this last couple seconds some confirmation of that.
Not quite, but close
Oh,
enough.
almost.
Yep, 20 points dropped for him there. It's not as big of a deal as the last one, I'm gonna say. Yeah, he was spending quite some time. I mean, understandably, spending some time at the end there trying to look for that other possibly smaller village that was mentioned on that sign. But obviously not showing up on the map, as it most of the time happens in South Africa. And
Right.
yeah, in the end, just not enough time to find that side street.
Yeah, did get a side street in the end, but just not the right one. Thankfully, close enough to pick up the lion's share of the points at least.
Yeah, either good instincts or a little bit of luck there as well. I don't think he would have, seen anything in particular that would have told him how far away he had been to the north. He did have, the distance to Blumhof, but that's very difficult to, accurately judge. If you just see a sign that's like 40 kilometers that way, if you have no other reference point, that's not the most useful information, but he still managed to get within a kilometer, so that's pretty good. And I guess that puts him up to about 450 points behind. Actually, not about 400 actually. So again, still around in the middle of nowhere, could overturn that immediately.
Absolutely.
So let's see if round 3 is that kind of round in the middle of nowhere as we get into it now. And it's a paved road again, but it does kind of look a little bit middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah, we at least got some lines on the side of the road now. That's a
Oh,
little bit
and
improvement.
yeah, there is another one of these road signs that mentions, I think, the R61, if I can read it right. Something like that.
It's a little hard to tell, but I think that looks right. Again, that's two out of 3 rounds now we've seen those small blue highway signs as opposed to your more typical larger ones, which can be hard to spot. And sometimes they have a lot of excess information on them too, but both really useful in this case. And it looks like Solar Sensei picked up a very helpful sign on Arthur's 61 there.
Yeah, absolutely. Craddock definitely a town you could recognize. It looks like Solar doesn't immediately see it. Oh, there we go. He has it. And I mean, 125 kilometers is quite a bit of distance, but you do have the reference there with Tarkastad being 50 kilometers. So he has a little bit there to judge it with. I'm not sure why he's looking between the two there. But I mean, with highways, you have that sometimes where it's like, these two towns are that way and then they're in opposite directions. But I don't think you'd have it on a road like this. As Lunacy, I don't know, I think he's already pinpointing. Not sure what exactly he's seeing that made him zone in on that specific part of the R61. I don't know if it was just road direction, maybe the angle of the road. But he seems fairly confident in it.
Yeah, it looks like he's just going now to see if he can find a little more clues to help him pinpoint it. And there, he's got the same sign now that Solar Sensei grabbed. So now it's a question of just zoning it in, honing it into the right place, and seeing if you can use any nearby features, whether it's roads or anything, to be able to pinpoint that.
Yeah, and his initial judgment of the potential, place he would be was quite. I mean, I don't want to say, well, it was wrong, as he had put his marker just next to Craddock, which, as he then found out, was a good 125 kilometers away. But yeah, the road he's at now looks pretty decent, I'd say. Again, not much to help yourself with in terms of pinpointing. There are a couple of roads off to the south that you can kind of use, but with no intersection at the start, it's still a bit dodgy to get the exact pinpoint right.
Agreed. I think with, like we discussed, these long straight roads with beautiful scenery, but not a whole lot in terms of useful information for pinning it down, is going to make it tough. And they both clearly have figured out the right stretch of the road it's on and are in the right area. It's just a question of just how close can they get to where it really is.
You do actually have there, interestingly, that what Lunacy just looked at to the north there, it looks like the mountain has a pretty significant, like, sort of change, I suppose. That might be something you could spot on the map where, just the elevation changes drastically on the mountain. I'm not sure always how much I trust that on Google Maps, but I mean, before.
Yeah, especially when the default map is not the terrain feature that you usually get on Google Maps, it can be a little deceptive as well. But you're right, that may be enough to at least get it, maybe not a perfect score, but within, you would assume 10 to 50 points.
Yep, 9 points there. That's pretty much it.
There we go.
Yeah, we know he has about a 400-point lead, so those 9 points there not costing him too much. Solar, again, still also looking for any kind of help there in trying to get a little bit closer. I think he's a little bit too far west still, kind of, putting it more east now. So I think he's pretty much on. Maybe not for the exact 5K, but I think he's a little bit closer than Lunacy at least. Actually,
Yeah,
not. Actually, not. He's a point further away.
1 point off. Yeah, I kind of had the same feeling where I was like, well, maybe within, a couple points of the finish, but no real points gained or lost in that case, just a single point between them.
Yeah, I think it goes from 403 to 404 points of a gap now. Still everything within range of just not even a super rule round, but if you can just get a few hundred points closer, probably don't want to have a city center or something like that. But if you just have a round where maybe at least the sign for useful information is a bit further away. I feel like they've had pretty useful signs pretty close to the start for all of the 3 rounds so far. So they kind of, or well, at least Solar Sensei, I'm assuming Lunacy is perfectly fine with what's been happening. But Solar Sensei wants maybe a little bit a further distance to any useful signs at the moment.
Definitely agree with that. I think it was important for this round for Solar Sensei to be able to keep himself in it with a really solid score. And now, like you said, you don't want anything too easy going forward because you have to fight for the differentials. You need something that's going to be hard enough to be able to make up the ground. And so hopefully there's a little bit of a difficulty and challenge in the next couple rounds here for to at least leave the door open and see if he can pull this back.
Yep. So let's go into round number 4 now. And well, I don't think that's what he was hoping for, as immediately we see a green sign. And they both kind of go towards it. And I mean, it's possible to not find a road in South Africa in 4 minutes, but I mean, normally you'd expect them, as Lunacy has already found Sutherland. So, yep, that this round is definitely not what will make the difference in Solar's favor, at least.
Yeah, I would expect them to both find this and at least get it very close, if not pinpoint it. When you get these fairly rural areas out in western South Africa, they tend to show up a little more prominently on the map just because there isn't a whole lot around them. So already,
Mm.
if you know you're in the 300s for the highways and you can nail it down to the western half of the area and start looking through that section, it should pop up fairly quickly for them.
Yeah, I don't know how it is for you, but I always kind of prefer looking for the 3-digit numbers. It's kind of similar for me in Japan as well, where I just have a much easier time of finding them. I think it's a combination of like there's more of them and they're shorter. So if you find one of them, you'll have similar numbers in the vicinity. Whereas if you have those two digit roads, they can be like 300 kilometers long, and the next one might be God knows where. So I occasionally struggle a bit more with finding those rather than the 3-digit ones.
No, I actually agree. We had this come up a little earlier this season when South Africa was the week we were all playing, and I felt the same way where I'd rather run into a three-digit highway because there's larger density of them, and you know that you can find a cluster of them and probably zone into the right one from there. The two-digit ones, although they do have their own kind of system of themselves in terms of ordering, tend to be, I think, a lot more varied in terms of where you're going to find them, and the difference between them, at least, are going to be sometimes a little more significant.
Yeah, as Lunacy does put his pin down, guesses about 160 meters off. So dropping 4 points, again, not a big deal, keeps his advantage. And we'll see how close Solar can get in the remaining 1 minute 50.
Definitely, and that was pretty efficient on Lunacy's side too, to zone in that pretty quickly, only spend about a minute, get it down within 10 points. I feel pretty comfortable with that if I was in his shoes.
Yeah, and Solo seems to be struggling a bit with getting an estimation of how far those 10 kilometers to Sutherland might be. He's been kind of looking up and down that road, trying to, I guess, find side roads that may appear on a map, which on a road like this can be very hard to identify. As you'll be kind of going, well, there's a side road here, and I see a couple of side roads on the map, but is this side road that side road on the map, or is it not? Unless you have a curve like we had in, I think it was round two, it can be very tough to tell. And usually those side roads in those rural rounds are like kilometers apart. So you don't really have an option of just going a little bit further and checking if it is that one and if the others make sense and line up correctly. But I do think he's in the right, like in the right stretch of road or on the right stretch of road. And he does have that sign towards Merville. So that confirms it to him. So he's somewhere south of that off road.
Yeah, it definitely looks like he's got it down into the right area, and I agree. I think sometimes the act of gauging distances can be so deceptive because it's really easy to say, "Oh, it's only 10 kilometers to the next town," and then when you pull up the map to try to really zoom in on that and try to do it, uh, what exactly is 10 kilometers
Yeah.
can be really hard to put down, and sometimes it's really helpful to have an extra sign or two. But looks like he has got it in this case, almost bang on the money. Not quite perfect, but 2 points closer and close enough to at least keep himself in it again.
Yeah, and I guess at least the first round he's won this direct confrontation. It's not going to get him much. It's 2 points back, but it's at least something. And he does still have a round to go, so who knows what can happen in that one.
Definitely, definitely. And at this point in Lunacy's shoes, I think you're looking for just a solid round. You've got about 400 or 500 points to spare, give or take. So, you do want to make it as good as possible, but as long as you can find the area, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, you want Cape Town with a nice view of the tabletop mountains.
Exactly, exactly.
But we'll see if his wish will get fulfilled as we'll get into round 5 now. And that does not look like Cape Town.
Oh dear, dirt roads in both directions. That's a good start.
Yeah, I think they are going. Are they going the same way? I think so. The coverage looks different somehow, but it might just be different, you know, times
Yeah,
of
I
it.
think they're going the same way. I think they've passed that pole. Yeah, and there's that same side
Okay,
road.
yeah, they are. So at
So now it's a
least,
question of just how far can you go? How fast can you make it to somewhere with a usable clue?
Can you make it to somewhere with a usable clue?
Yeah, exactly.
But at least they'll see the same clues if, neither of them decides to turn around or they hit any intersection at some point where they could diverge.
Definitely, yeah. It's always a little bit of a shame when you see it decided by somebody going left and somebody going right, but it looks like that will not be an issue in this case.
Not for now, at least, although.
Yeah,
Nope.
we'll wait till we get to the first junction and then see where
Yeah,
we go.
it's not a junction either, so. Can you turn off there? Again, I don't think so. So they'll just keep trudging along, keep going south. There's a little bit of a turn, much excitement there.
And already, at least, in their minds, they're thinking, well, I don't know where it is, but I can start to rule out certain regions of the country
Yeah.
because there's definitely parts that, don't match some of the more dramatic geography, at least in parts of the very far north of the country, or towards like Kruger or down towards like Cape Town, like you said, like right around the mountains itself. So at least, it's not going to help them maybe get a great score, but at least they're already starting to think, well, I know what area that's probably not in.
Yeah, you can exclude the whole like northwest as well, which is pretty much just a desert. So they have a couple of areas probably that they've narrowed it down to. Still far too much for any kind of pinpointing attempts. But Lunacy has turned around and he has now hit a junction, so he will be deciding on one direction.
Okay, so
And
left it is.
yeah, Solar has turned around and is going the same way again. Um, I'm assuming he's just forgotten which direction he has went at the start. Has happened to me on occasions too. He'll probably hit that sign and realize his mistake and now actually go the opposite direction.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Sometimes that can be a little heartbreaking when you realize, "Oh, I wish I had those 10 seconds back that I didn't spin
Yeah.
around there."
At least he had that sign close to the start that immediately told him, "Oh, I've seen this before." It's even more frustrating when you're like somewhere in a rural place where there's really nothing, and even after like 30 seconds, you're still like, "I don't know, have I seen this before?" Ah,
Yeah. Am I going in circles?
yeah.
Where am I?
And he's also going the same way as Lunacy. So, considering how long Lunacy has been going this way without really finding anything at all, I think we can pretty much say that Solar isn't going to find more than Lunacy at this point. So, as long as Lunacy doesn't find any good information, it'll likely just come down to region guessing in that last round.
Yep, yep. And of course, like you said, they can't know it at this point, being immersed in their own games. But with Lunacy being farther ahead in terms of distance, moving down this particular direction, we know now that there isn't a whole lot to go for. So Solar can't know that at this point, but unfortunately, yeah, unlikely to find anything too useful in the next 30 seconds here.
Yeah, and what Lunacy's experiencing right now is also kind of the thing that you're not really sure you want because he's now entering a town and it's kind of like, well, I've got 10 seconds left. So I'm entering a town now. I don't know if it would potentially have useful information. So I don't know if my opponent found something in here, but there's some signs there and time's up. Great.
Last seconds. Yeah.
And a great region guess from Solar, though, will turn the match on its head. Just 57 kilometers is a pretty good performance there. Kind of going for these southern mountains along the coast. Lunacy a bit further towards the northeast and will unfortunately lose out on that game. He's kind of looking at the map. Now it's interesting just from looking at it how it's possible to just find no information there because it actually looks like there's a few ways that would lead somewhere. But yeah, kind of, I don't want to say too indecisive. It's just his strategy of kind of trying both directions. But if he'd kind of stuck with the one that he went in later, he might have made it to that town earlier. I actually, when I played this seat, I did make it to that town and to those signs with like a minute left. I can tell you it didn't help me. So it might not have helped Lunacy either. But yeah, a bit unfortunate there for him. I don't think there was anything, wrong with what he did in that last round. I mean, even his region guess, like looking at it now, it's not very far away. It's more so just that Solar with an even better region guess there, which decides the game in the end.
Definitely, definitely. I think a little bit of a victim of the time limit for both these players because I think given an additional minute or two, it's like very possible they would have gone and find a sign and been able to get a little closer. But they both had the same idea with those kind of mountainous terrain on the southern coast, or at least near the southern coast. And Yeah, both I think had pretty good guesses as far as the region guesses go. But like you said, Sensei was just a little bit or quite a bit closer, and I don't want to say fortunate in the end because you don't want to take away the skill factor of being able to recognize that and get the right feel of the area. But when you are plonking it down with 3 seconds to go, there is a little bit of a good dice roll that goes into that. But yeah, very impressive last round to pull it back. I mean, it did look like Lunacy had the edge and the upper hand for the first 4 rounds there going through it, and like we were saying though, it just needed is one round with enough of a lack of clues to be able to break that open, and it's exactly the break that Solar Sensei needed, and fair play to him for taking advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's now 1-0 to Solar Sensei, but we've still got 2 maps to go, so we'll be back in a couple seconds with Lithuania. All right, now let's take a look at that second map, which is gonna be Lithuania. And kind of in a similar vein to South Africa, I guess play similarly, where you can just have those very raw rounds where you'll just not find any or not find much information that could help you. I mean, you're probably in Lithuania, there's a 99% chance you're going to find like a town sign somewhere, but it might be a town with a population of about 7 people, and you might not be able to find it on a map. The only difference, I guess, here really is that Lithuania might be a tad less region guessable than South Africa.
Absolutely, yeah. Not only there's going to be a little less diversity in terms of the environment that we're looking at, but it's going to punish these players a lot harder too. Whereas some of those rounds we saw in South Africa, where they were a little bit off and they lost 2, 3, 4, 10 points. Those same kind of mistakes and inabilities to pinpoint may cost you closer to hundreds of points
Yeah,
in somewhere like Lithuania. So that's going to make a big difference. Where if they are struggling to pinpoint it, and like I said, some of the towns are going to be very difficult to find, that could be a big make or break in some of these rounds.
definitely. And I think from what we've seen in the first map, Lunacy seems to be a bit more comfortable with those pinpointing situations. So I think more so here than in South Africa, the real difference we might see is that if kind of the small mistakes kind of just add up in Solar Sensei's side, you might see those dropped points add up more quickly. And in a situation like last seed, where he might have been, those 400 points behind after 3 rounds, this time, if it's, a similar kind of degree of wrongness, I suppose, he might not be 400, but he might be like 4,000 points behind. And then, a region guess is just not going to cut it at the end. So kind of those, I guess they're not really random guesses, but more so guesses without much information are much more unlikely to make the real difference in the end.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I think it'll be a case where, even with good clues and even if we get quote unquote easier rounds, it's going to probably be open until the end because you get down to round 5, similar to what we saw in South Africa, and have one round that's still capable of just blowing the whole thing open.
Yep. So let us start with round 1 now. And it's still paved roads. We've had so many paved roads in what I really wouldn't expect from South Africa and Lithuania.
Wow, and then quick snap, and suddenly we're on a nice marked road that seemed to come out of almost nowhere.
Yeah, apologies there for the viewers. For some reason, it wasn't updating one of my sources in OBS. It's fixed now. You can see the solar screen. But there, you didn't miss much. They've not really gone too far, but you can see some very interesting street view happenings there, where it seems the road has changed quite a bit at some point.
Yeah, and unfortunately, even though it is a little nicer of a road with a bit more road markings, they haven't really come across anything too useful yet. I haven't seen any signs of any real value, at least in the first, couple seconds here.
Yeah, Solar hitting a dead end there, kind of. I don't know if he's just not seeing there we go, the big road that Lunacy is currently on. And Lunacy himself also kind of just looking at every sign he can find, but not finding much information.
Yeah, Solar Sensei there checking out that van that had half of an email address on it, it looked like, or half a website rather. But unfortunately, not
Oh,
too much you can get out of that.
as Lunacy gets an unfortunate street view bug that kind of happens very rarely, but is nonetheless just as annoying. Where sometimes you'll click along, probably annoyed about bad movement. You click again, and suddenly it just refreshes the round for you. Not the timer.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
it'd be
Yeah.
nice if it just reset the timer as well, but no, it's not doing that. It just puts you back to the start. Kind of the similar bug, I imagine, with what's going on when you like set a checkpoint and try to return to it, and it just refreshes and puts you back to the start. But that kind of just gave Solarsensei a chance to catch up and make it to the same sign that Lunacy is currently looking at. And
Yeah, they both found it, both looking at it, and looks like they're already starting to really take a close look at the map here.
yeah, and those signs in Lithuania, they can sometimes be a bit tricky because they will usually mention where you are, but it'll usually mention like the county or whatever. And the county names are usually named after cities, but they're not spelled the same way. So you can see up there in the top left of Lunacy's screen, it says Xiaoliu, which is the county that Xiaoliai is in. But the thing is, do you trust that to be the same thing? I guess if you don't know it. Of course, if you know that it's the same thing, then all the better. But I'm not sure if Lunacy does know, and Solar doesn't even seem to have seen it or just assumed that it's something else and not Xiaoliai. Because I think Xiaoliai is I know it's one of the biggest, and well, that helps. But yeah, it's
Yep.
it's one of the biggest cities in Lithuania. So Solar's struggling a bit with finding it. There we go.
There it is. Yeah, both got it down, or at least Solar's got it down now. And like I said, at least once you're confident that is the actual name of the place you're looking for, and it's prominent enough on the map, at least that helps you zone in on it. I think some of the challenge for depending on where you're from and how experienced you are with GeoGuessr is when you look at certain signs, especially in languages you don't speak, is just trying to even identify what is a town name or what's a county name and what's
Yeah.
just another word of the language that's not useful to you at all. So definitely Solar looks like he's got a good start on that and at least recognize that and being able to zoom in on that area. Lunacy looks like not quite as much at the moment. He's still looking around, but doesn't look as confident with the map movements.
But he does seem to put it at least near Cialia. He kind of missed the sign that Solar saw because that's that sign. Yep, that's a little
Oh,
late,
there it
Lunacy.
is.
But he will end up actually quite a bit closer than Solar because Solar just going kind of on the wrong side of the town, and Lunacy plonking a little bit closer, just next to the next to the lake there. Neither of them realizing that they were near the airport. Neither did I when I played the seed. But kind of, I guess if you think about it a little bit, it made sense. It was kind of a very isolated road that just went into the city. And yeah, I guess we'll start off the second seed here in pretty much the exact same fashion as the first one, with a slight lead for Lunacy.
Yeah, and that was a tough one too, because there were signs, and they both were able to figure out the city they were in and around. But as we were discussing, even with that, they were still punished pretty harshly for not being exactly dead on the money. And Lunacy definitely came out favorite there in the end when all the chips fell.
Yeah, and I would have liked to see them actually pinpoint that round because I would have liked to see if they could have accomplished that because I think it was not a big problem, but kind of interesting with the switch of coverage from the start to kind of like the first click. I can tell you it was accurate. The map did tell you, or it was exactly where you, I guess, were supposed to guess, but neither of them made it to that stage. So I guess we'll never find out if they could have. And yeah, we'll see how they'll do in the next round now. And well, we finally have some gravel. That's nice.
Yeah, it's a good, proper rural road. We'd love
Yeah.
to see it.
And I wanted to get into a little bit while they're just traveling down that gravel road about that last point you mentioned. Oh, it's turned into a paved road now. Great. And there's a sign there too. Of course there is. It mentions a few towns. I don't think any of them are particularly big. So I recognize Valaukis, but wouldn't know immediately where it is. Don't think I recognize anything else on that sign. So that point you made about, knowing languages to a point, not where like what the words mean, but which of the words are the cities and towns is, I think, one of the most useful skills you can have in a country to play Geoguessr, to play moving Geoguessr, of course, just because you save so much time by knowing what you have to read and what you can just ignore.
Definitely, definitely. I think a huge skill in GeoGuessr in general is just the ability to like prioritize knowledge. Essentially, is the idea of like when you look at a sign, it's just like, okay, do I need to know? Do I
Yeah.
want to spend the time even reading this sign or not? Trying to evaluate that is a huge skill to develop.
Exactly. And it's not even necessarily just a skill that's language based or a skill that's like pretty much uniform across all countries. But I noticed that myself with, for example, like in Lithuania, I'll know 100%. I don't even have to look at the sign. I'll know if it says something useful or not. Whereas, for example, in the US, I just, I don't even know what I have to look at, what will have information, what won't. And yeah, that's just a significant disadvantage, I suppose, and costs a lot of time. But yeah, it looks like none of them have found much so far, as Solar is coming up to a great sign there, Jurbakas and Skaudville in either direction. Jurbakas, you can see it there to the southwest on his screen, is a fairly big town. And I'm sure he'll find it eventually. He's not finding it yet, but we'll see. And
Agreed. Yeah. Oh, and there's Lunacy with another really good sign, although a different one.
yep,
Interestingly enough.
less good. It mentions two cities
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, so you'd think, yeah, maybe. But the significant part there, the cities' distances are smaller, and usually that's not what you want because that means they could still be big towns, but it's not guaranteed. Whereas if you see a sign like Sola where the city is mentioned that's 27 kilometers away, you can be pretty much sure that you'll be able to find that in Lithuania.
Yeah, and that's a great example seeing them both side by side too, because apart from the distance markers that you've got, unless you already know the towns, there's no way to distinguish if it's a small village or a big city that the signs are pointing to. They look the same on that besides the distance, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a question of just do they recognize any of those? Are they going to be able to identify them on the map in time? And if so, you've got enough information to probably get pretty close otherwise. But this is one of those great examples in Lithuania where, yeah, even if you have a sign to a city, that doesn't mean you're gonna be able to find it in time.
Yeah, and actually, very funny things happening here. You were able to see there on Solar's screen as he kind of went away from seeing it. He had pretty much straight center of his screen one of the towns that Lunacy had on his sign, but he doesn't. And Lunacy has his town here, Nemaxia, right on the middle of his screen now, but he can't see it. And I think the main reason why he can't see it is that it's right on a highway, and that usually just makes it more difficult to find. It's similar with the border cities that are also just more difficult to find, because when you're looking for a small town, you're not focusing on the towns along a highway because you're not expecting them to be there. So it's very easy to miss them as time runs out, and neither managed to find the cities that appeared about 10 times on their screens. But Lunacy will get a little bit closer, at least. Will gain 600 points by being 50 kilometers away. And Solar, unfortunately, 70 kilometers, will be dropping another 600 points. So he should be at about 1,100 now between the two of them.
Yeah, that round was definitely a Lithuania special, right? I mean, there was information,
Yeah.
and in the right hands, maybe that would have been enough to nail it down. But we see that both players clearly struggled to, be able to locate thoughts on the maps, which I don't blame them for because there's a lot of towns and a lot of cities to look through, and
Mm.
we see it so many times. And I think all GeoGuessr players are familiar with this experience where when you're watching somebody else play, all these towns point up the map so obviously you're like, oh, it's right there.
Absolutely.
But when you're in the moment and when you're focused, it's so easy for your eyes to be locked in, and you can just move the cursor over the exact town you're looking for and not even register it.
Yeah, it's a thing that people that don't know this themselves, that don't play GeoGuessr, or that it's a phenomenon in a lot of other things as well. But people that don't experience this regularly will look at this and be like, "Well, it's right there. Why are they not seeing it?" But it is so difficult to kind of pay attention to everything that's happening on your screen while you're map scrolling, and so difficult as well to just kind of look over the map in a way where you don't miss anything, but at the same time you're not just like looking through it so slowly that you don't have the time to look through the whole map in those 3 minutes that you've got. You need to kind of find a balance. And yeah, it seems like just in this case both of them not spotting the towns. And it's also that thing you mentioned with your cursor going right over it. You can never really know where the people looking at the map are actually looking. Like it's not like people are just staring at the exact center point of the map the whole time. You'll be kind of,
Yep.
looking with your eyes over the whole kind of image or like outline of the map that you've got. And if that just so happens to be in the wrong spot for the second that you scroll over something, then, well, you'll just not end up seeing it. But yeah, another small advantage for Lunacy. And we'll see if Solar can turn it around in round 3 now. More paved roads. Unbelievable.
At least some houses nearby to start, so we've got some signs of life.
Yeah, should be a fairly doable round. It's hard to tell sometimes, but usually when you have paved roads through a town, it's not going to be super small. It might not be super easy to find, but if you've practiced it a little bit, you'll at least either be able to recognize the town name, or you'll find a sign within the town usually that will mention some other town name that you might recognize. So we'll see if one of the two applies to either of our players here.
Yeah, and it definitely looks like they're both as fast as they can trying to get out and towards a larger road if possible. I think they're both looking for, where are those signs to the next town, or where are those hopefully a highway sign that can point us to something a little more easier to spot on the map than what we've got. But we see Lunacy heading towards a gravel road, which is maybe not the most optimistic thing in the world.
And Solar, they're having a little bit of a sign that didn't seem to give him much. And there you see another one of the most kind of useful features of Lithuanian Geoguessr, or Lithuanian real life, I guess, which is that usually it mentions the closest town on the town exit signs. In this case, a town that's 2 kilometers away that probably no one that doesn't live there has ever heard of, but sometimes they're very useful. And 1 kilometer away in the other direction that Solar has just found. So it seems like out of those 3 town names that they will now know between the two of them, the town that they're in is probably the most likely to be findable.
Yeah, and they both come on the same sign now at this point. So Solarsensei's starting to peruse the map a little bit and seeing if anything jumps out to him right away. I think this is the point where you have that sign for the town. You're keeping that in your back pocket, and hopefully, if you get a better clue, you can use that later to try to pinpoint it. But it's going to be a tough ask to at least just find it. I think just straight up through looking through the map.
Yeah, the huge dilemma that you've got here, though, is that with a sign like this, okay, the town I'm in is fairly sizable. It's maybe not huge, but it's not bad. And the next town over is a kilometer away. A kilometer is actually not too bad because you can probably make it there fast enough. But if it's like 2 or 3 kilometers, you're like, well, it's probably also a small town. And even if I make it there, the chances of there being something useful aren't very big. So do I want to spend that time rather looking at the map and trying to find the town that I'm in, which is Solar's method? Or do I want to just kind of continue going, hope for the best? Maybe the next town's better, maybe it's got some more information. But yeah, Lunacy's just found another town, another sign that's and with another town that's another kilometer away. And he'll keep going, but I don't think he's very happy about it.
No, I think both players are probably at this point coming to peace with the fact that we may not necessarily get something a whole lot better than these. So yeah, going as far as they can, and hopefully they'll get something better. But this might be a case where you're going to struggle to find it in the map at this point, and unless they get something really nice that pops up in the next 30 seconds here, it's
Oh,
probably going to be another plonk it down and see.
something
Oh,
really
but we
nice
do
that
have
plopped up.
there we go, just when we needed it.
Yeah. Will Lunacy find the things? Yeah, Kedainiai is one of the bigger towns that he does recognize. The actually interesting part there, as he finds the town that they started close to, was the kind of the top city there. I think it was called Ariogala or something. That was 25 kilometers away. It was actually a town I've never heard of before I saw that sign. So not always the biggest towns on with the biggest distance, but yeah, just town knowledge coming in very helpful there. And it looks like Lunacy might even be able to pinpoint it pretty closely, while Solar, unfortunately, actually with a very good region guess, I think, because I don't think he had any cities that he found, but still 24 kilometers away will drop him another 2,000 points. I actually do think that
Yeah.
on one of these signs that they found at the start, it mentioned something regarding Kaunas. Obviously not, written as Kaunas, but in like a slightly different way. I'm not 100% sure about it anymore, but considering the location is very close to Kaunas, I think it might have been that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. A really, really good reaching guess out of Solar Sensei there because he didn't have that same sign that Lunacy got. And so really without a whole lot of information to go off of to pinpoint it further, to be able to get that close, I think is really impressive. But for Lunacy, I mean, that's a really good performance there, and it's kind of like we were discussing earlier about making these risk assessment decisions of like, is it worth trying to go to the next town or not? That was a case where just a little bit further, just go a little bit further, and hopefully something pops up at the end, and it did just in the nick of time. A
Yep.
really nice sign popped up that didn't look obvious it was going to be there, but that's a good example of when sometimes, yeah, you just need to go a little bit farther maybe, and you get something. Don't give up until the very end. But yeah, I think well earned to be able to maybe not exactly 5K it, but I think that's a very close pinpoint, considering the time constraints on it.
Yeah, definitely. And that was another kind of showing of a pretty unique skill set, I suppose, that you have in some countries where, but especially in Lithuania, where you need a lot of practice to be able to tell whether you can find city names or not. And I guess Lunacy there just kind of looking at the city names, kind of going, okay, I have never heard of that. I'm probably not going to find it. And that's why he just continued. Whereas Sola, maybe with less practice, just didn't know whether he could find it. Maybe it's a big town. He doesn't recognize it, but he doesn't have the confidence to say, okay, I never heard of it. That means it can't be a big town. That means I'm probably not going to find it. And yeah, you can't tell obviously if that was the reasoning behind Lunacy going further or Solar looking for it, but it's always a factor where just practice upon practice just helps with being able to tell whether an information is worth looking for. All right, then let's get into round 4 with quite a big distance now. I think that was another 1,800 points, so I think we're at about 3,000 points separating the two of them. Still 2 rounds to go, so nothing's lost yet. But yeah, let's see in round 4 now whether whether Solar Sensei will be able to come back from that. I mean, he's done it last map in the last round, so maybe we'll see it once again.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we get another strong final round, or at least we have 2 more to go in this case, but a strong finish from Solar Sensei there to kind of snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But not a bad start in this case. We've already got some nice paved roads, some nice populated areas. There should be signs not too far from where we're starting, so both players are already starting to look. And there we go. Solar Sensei has found a pretty spectacular sign right off the bat.
Yeah, Mazekiai, one of the bigger. He has a massive opponent for a second, but one of the bigger towns that he does pretty much instantly find. So in this case, I think a city that he knew where it was, rather than him just looking for it and finding it quickly. And he does have a couple others. I'm not actually sure. He kind of went past the town exit sign very quickly, so I'm not sure if he's kind of registered it out of the corner of his eye and just hasn't looked at it, or if he's just kind of missed it and doesn't really know the name of the town he started in, because that is very useful in a situation like this, because if he doesn't, then he's kind of looking for the 2 other cities there, which are still 8 and 12 kilometers away, so even finding them doesn't help much. But with that sign, he at least knows that, okay, it's right in the center of his screen. He knows the city he's come from, so this should be a fairly easy round for him to finish off.
Yeah,
And
and Lunacy has found the same sign as well at this point, but still starting to move away. It didn't look like, at least based on his movement on the map, that he had immediately recognized the city at hand. So yeah, let's see if he can put a couple things together here and triangulate himself. Because I think at this point for Solar Sensei, it's just a case of now starting to really zone in on it and just try to use the remaining time to pin it down.
yeah, that's an interesting one, because from what we've seen so far, I would have assumed that Lunacy maybe with the slightly better city knowledge, but kind of a hole in there with the apparent, not knowing of Majekiai. But we'll see if he can find some other information that helps him further, or if he's just gonna decide, okay, this road is leading nowhere. I might as well look for the things on the map. And yeah, that seems to be exactly it. Oh,
Okay. So
Solar
like you said,
gets.
it's a
Yeah.
prominent one though, so we'll see if it pops up for him.
Yep, there we go.
There we go. Yeah. And funny enough, it wasn't the larger town he saw. It was Vix? Yeah, how do you pronounce that? I'm not
That's a
sure.
good question.
Yeah, that's
I
the
yeah,
Lithuanian stuff.
maybe Vikshnai, something like that. I don't know if you pronounce the I and E as like one letter or not. So it could be Vikshnai as well.
That's a
But
good question. Yeah, it'd be fun to learn that at some point. We'll have to get some Lithuanians here to clarify.
yep, unfortunately, I don't think I know anyone. So yeah, if you are Lithuanian, you know, tell us in the comments. Tell us how it's pronounced. But yeah, Lunacy has also found the town. So even if he might, not be able to pinpoint in the remaining 40 seconds, he should still, not lose too many points. I think actually the road name of one of the roads is wrong on a sign fairly close to the start. But yeah,
Mm.
even if he's on the wrong road, it shouldn't be a problem. And I think he is on the
Yeah, and at
right
this
one.
point, it's just about making sure he doesn't lose too many points. But I think at this point, they're both going to get a very high score in this round.
Yep, 5K for
Oh,
both of them. So
about as high as you can get, really.
yep. And that's, I guess, not a good sign for Solar, as it'll put him in pretty much the exact same situation as he was in the last seed in South Africa, where he needs to overcome a pretty big deficit with one round to go. And kind of pretty much exactly the situation I mentioned before, where with South Africa, it kind of even these slight pinpointing errors or otherwise just not amounting to too many points. Whereas here he's now 3K points behind. So he really needs to just find the last place. A good region guess won't do.
Absolutely, yeah. Now it comes down to a case where it's got to be not only a good guess and getting down, but it's got to rely on dropping points elsewhere as well.
Yeah. So let's see in that last round now. And well, I mean, just from the start of it, it looks like it could be such a round. The unfortunate part, I guess, there for Solar is that they both headed the same way to start with.
Yeah, I think when you're looking for a little more volatility and you want to see a bigger discrepancy in scores, that's the case where you're hoping that maybe they go opposite directions to start and one person gets great clues and the other person just gets kind of hung out to dry. But now they're going the same direction. It's the case of will they both see the same information and are they both going to make use of that in the as efficient manner?
Well, they'll certainly see the same sign here with Calvaria and Vilkaviškis. Again, not towns that I think are particularly huge, but you can see on Lunacy's screen, there we go, Vilkaviškis right there. So, with that being 17 kilometers away, I unfortunately think for Solar that pretty much no matter what Lunacy does here, I don't think he's gonna drop more than 3,000 points in this round.
Yeah, and of course, obviously the players don't know that at this point. So they're going to be trying to get the maximum score that they can. But yeah, for Lunacy, I agree. It's already starting to filter into the right area, and so at this point, I think it would be unlikely that enough points are dropped to really make or break this one. But we'll see. We'll see if they can nail it down, and we'll see if we can get all the way down to a perfect pinpoint here.
Yep, not very easy, but they do have a few curves at the start, so it's doable. Solar seems to be still struggling to find the exact intersection he's made it to. Definitely not the easiest task in the world here. He's got a few distances to signs, but there's so many small roads connecting all of them that it can be quite tricky to find the exact road that he's on.
Definitely, definitely. And both these players are really skilled. I think that in general, though, it's very easy to get disoriented when you're playing and there are signs pointing to cities in different directions and roads that start branching out in different directions, and you start thinking, oh, was that to the north or to the south or to the east? And you get turned around, and that can be very challenging to even just keep your bearing straight.
Yeah, as Lunacy has dropped 10 points, but obviously to no effect, as Solo would have to get about 8,000 points in his last round to overtake Lunacy, which even with the best pinpoint in the world is just not gonna happen.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, that is a little too much to ask in this case. But nice work from Lunacy there to round that out, and efficiently too. There was time to spare in that round.
Yeah.
With the plonk down, so that's a good feeling, and that's got to be encouraging for him to be able to say, yeah, I found pretty much where I was. I was confident enough with it, and I didn't have to sweat about the clock at the end either.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of just that. that little bit of time where you're like, I got this. It doesn't come down to the last few seconds. That's actually something I notice a lot when I play like kind of speedrun games where it's just like you don't have a timer, but you just try to get it as quick as possible. The way you play rounds when you know you have enough time available is just very different to when you're on the clock and you know, oh god, there's only 2 minutes left. What do I do? It's just a whole different type of playing it, and yeah, so that's just nice to know. That you have the time available to do your thing and play in the way that you find the most optimal.
Yeah, you can breathe out a little bit, and you can say, "All right, we got a minute. We can start focusing on the details and try to make sure we don't overlook something, that we missed." Or that's always heartbreaking when you realize with a minute left, you're like, "Oh, there was a detail I had or a clue that I just didn't think about because I was in time pressure."
Yep, exactly. And
And it
Solar,
looks like Solar Sensei though has got that down as well.
yeah. I guess another round where he was better than Lunacy by 4 points this time, but again, just not enough in the end. He will lose this map by 3,042 points. So a little bit more than the South Africa map, this time in the opposite way. But still, I think both of them did fairly well there. Just in the end, Solar with one more round that he just couldn't quite get. Yeah, that will make the difference here. So it's 1-1 now, and it'll all come down to the world map to decide this game.
Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah, no, great performance both them so far. Love that it's tied going into the final one. And yeah, I think that was a good performance of both of them for that map. Definitely Lunacy, of course, had the edge, when it came out at the end of it. But for what can be a very challenging map, I think that's really encouraging for both players to put on at least 3 solid rounds. And then the last 2 rounds, I think were still really good. Despite some of the difficulties in orienting yourself and finding clues for those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be back in another couple seconds with map 3. All right, now we're back with a diverse AI world. It's 1-1 between Lunacy and Solarsensei, so it all comes down to this. And during the regular season, Lunacy with the slightly better score, although both had a great performance. It was 24,943 for Lunacy and 24,922 for Solarsensei. So very close during the regular season, but a difference like that, while during the regular season would just be a draw, in this case, would decide the game for Lunacy because there's no draws here. So yeah, we'll see what kind of seed awaits the two of them here. But before we get into it, you've seen them play 2 maps now. Any kind of favorite here for this last one?
Yeah, based on the first 2 maps we've seen, it certainly seems like Lunacy has a little bit of an edge. At least the South Africa performance, did feel like there was a couple stronger rounds for the first 4, and then just not being able to find the last one really kind of dropped the ball there and allowed Solar Sensei to come in and pick up that up. And then on Lithuania, I think it was close between them. I felt like both players had their ups and downs in different rounds. But generally speaking, we're around the same course, and it really just came down to 1 or 2 rounds there at the end that were able to split them. Where Solar Sensei wasn't really able to locate some of the spots. But with the global map, this is definitely always a case of well-rounded GeoGuessr knowledge. Not quite as how well do you know this country, how well have you practiced this specific map. I think they should test both players. But based on their performances, yeah, I think it'll be really tight between them. They both are able to perform at a level where I expect to see 24Ks and 24 9s out of these kinds of maps, assuming that they get, reasonably enough clues. So yeah, not a whole lot to split between them. Maybe we give the slight edge to Lunacy, but I think it's gonna go down probably to the very end.
All right, then we'll see if your prediction comes true as we'll get into round number 1 now. And, well, looks like they've got some... Wait, oh, right. I forgot about that part. Before we do that... Okay, I'm just going to blank that out or something. Solar actually failed to record his first round. I should mention that. I forgot about it. I just noticed it now again. So we'll start with him in round 2. And we'll only watch Lunacy for his first round. But it seems like we won't have to wait for long as Lunacy's already down to pinpointing it. And there we go.
Yeah, very quick, very efficient. That was wasted absolutely no time. So thankful for him to not keep us waiting too much.
Yeah, Lunacy knew. Lunacy knew he had to speedrun that to keep up. And yeah, I guess we'll just go right through with that. Solar also managed to pinpoint that. I'm assuming he took longer, but well, we could look at the result screen, but as long as we don't do that, we'll never know. Yeah, that's. I guess we'll just go right into round 2. We'll just act like this is a 4-round seed, a new specialty, and yeah, I think we can just get right into it again with round 2 now. And yeah, now they're actually in the same round, so a little bit better for viewing purposes.
And right away, similar to last round, amazing signs right off the bat. We have on a highway, we have clues, we have cities, we have distances. So this should be not too challenging for both of them. It's just gonna be a case of, yeah, can you start to already locate what part of Italy you're going to be in? We've got signs for Cagliari already, so we already kind of know we're on the island. So within 30 seconds, we've already narrowed it down quite a bit, or at least on Lunacy's side, he's managed to pick that up.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, no distance to Cagliari, so he doesn't know exactly how far away from it he is. I did kind of show him the specific road numbers though on that sign, so I think he should just be able to kind of scroll along that and try to find the other 2 towns mentioned on those signs to be able to help him get a little bit closer. And there they are as he almost scrolls past them.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've got Solarsensei there as well. So both of them have already got the right highway. They're both in the right part of the country. Now it's just a question of with 2.5 odd minutes to spare, how efficient are they going to be with their time in terms of being able to pin this down and pinpoint it?
Yeah, Solar again struggling to kind of see what's on his screen as both of the towns, I think it was Barlado and Milis, are right there for him, just a little bit to his southwest. He's zoomed out a little bit too far, but there they are. And now he spots them as well, yeah. I guess he doesn't actually know any distance to them either, I guess. I don't actually know. The sign that told him like Barlado was like half a kilometer away was very close to the start, so I'd be surprised if he hasn't seen it yet, but at the same time, I can't actually say I know for sure if he has or not.
Yeah, it's always tough to gauge, right? Especially when you're playing, you got so many things thinking through your mind of like what you're looking at on the screen, where you're placing your mouse, what you're looking at the map, if you're moving around and trying to pivot. So it's very easy to read into, whether they see it or not can be hard to tell.
Yeah, and Lunacy does get the perfect score on his second round as well. Fairly difficult to pinpoint actually on that little side street to the highway, but thankfully due to it being a world map, you don't have to be quite as accurate. And so about 50 meters will be enough. Solar also seems to zone in on the right road.
Yep, got some nice cactus around, and it looks like it's just a matter of time until he gets the spot right down perfectly. He's already got the right street. He's already got the right part of the road. It's just a question of just taking the extra couple seconds to make sure.
Yep, traveling to the south to make sure the kind of bend of the road checks out. And you'll see it turns over to the kind of the west here, I guess, for a little bit. You should be able to confirm with that as it swoops back around. That seems fairly distinct, so should be fairly easily noticeable on the map.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a nice, almost like big chicane that you can point to.
Yeah, but I think from his play at the moment, I would say that he's not actually sure of the side road that he's found, because what he's seen so far is more than enough to confirm the right road. So he seems to be actually looking for more information here, which he does find. There we go. 300 meters to Barlado makes it fairly obvious.
And he's seen the big roundabouts now too, so he can be confident that it's north of there.
Yeah, it has taken a little bit more of his time, so he's only got 15 seconds to pinpoint. But that should be enough. It's not an easy pinpoint to make, actually. I think if you don't have enough time, if you're a little bit careless, you can easily be more than 170 meters off on it. As 57. So, nope, he's close enough. And yeah, we'll go into round 3 tied as well with 10,000 points each at the moment.
Yeah. Nicely done. Nicely done. Kate held it to the very last second, but I love to see it when the clock's running out, being able to slam the pin down and get that 5K.
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see there on my screen in OBS, an advertisement on the right of the screen, kind of blocking a little bit of our view. I hope it does go away once we go in the next round, so we're fine there. Yeah, 3 rounds to go. So far, everyone's perfect. I mean, it would be kind of fun to see a 25k draw as well, and it coming down to time. In which case, I think Lunacy's currently quite far ahead. So I guess Solar will have to hope that Lunacy drops a couple of points here or there. But I mean, we're still early on in the seed, and that can very much still happen. So let's get into round 3 right now. And this one's a little bit of an interesting one.
Oh yeah, all right. So we're on a paved road to start. We've got mile per hour sign on Solar Sensei's screen there, which does tell us at least we're probably in North America
Yep.
or the United States for that matter, because that you can
Yes.
rule out Canada right off the bat.
Yeah. And there
Okay,
are
and those are
license plates.
yeah, American plates, and with both these players being American, now it's a case where okay, well, I think most players are going to be strong enough to be able to figure out you're in the U.S. in the first place, and then get a good idea. But you have a little higher standards, I think, from the U.S. players to be able to maybe with a little more efficiency be able to figure out what state you're in or what region you're in.
Yeah, I can tell you when I was playing the seeds, I mean, this kind of landscape looked so outlandish to me in a way that I didn't even really, I don't think like I saw the, like, turned around and looked at the miles per hour sign. I don't think I knew like which continent I'm on for like the first 2 minutes or so, just because I've never really seen this combination of different things before, like, the yellow road line in the middle, this kind of landscape, English on the signs and stuff like that. I could have, just from landscape and things like that, I could have seen this being Australia even.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's the case where if it wasn't for that speed limit sign right off the bat, I don't think there's anything that's immediately screaming, this is the United States. You know what I mean? I think it definitely is unique from, like you said, the combination of geographic features and the road lines aren't the most typical thing you'd ever see in the world. And a lot of times when they're in the US and you're playing a seed and you're not really sure exactly where you're at to begin with, you're starting to at least look at, geographic things and starting to say, okay, well, does it look like I'm in the Northwest or does it look like I'm in maybe in the Southeast or if I'm in like the Rocky Mountains or somewhere like that? And immediately off the bat here, I don't see anything that right away shouts to me that this is in a certain region or not. So I think there's a lot of places that are still open for where this could end up.
Yeah, certainly not the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, I think we could rule that one out pretty quickly. Oh, and there we go. Lunacy has decided it is in the California, in Northern California. Or no, he's
Yeah,
going a little
these,
closer to the south.
I've learned these kind of specific signs that Lunacy was looking at, and that also just one appeared there on Solar's, side screen, are unique to California, and they tell you which county it is as well. So, well, those signs that
Ooh,
Solar also found just now will also tell you quite a lot of things.
yeah, that's the gold mine there. So we've got some proper California highway signs. We've got some towns and some distances, and that should help him find that pretty quickly because 84 at least is a pretty notable highway. That's one I think that should pop up. Not immediately, but with a bit of perusing, I think you should be able to find that. Another key indicator here is that California is, of course, an extremely large state. Um, but based on what we're seeing, it's we're clearly in more of an agricultural area. So while that doesn't narrow it down too much, because there's a lot of agriculture in the valley, that does at least rule out some parts of the state that we
Yeah,
don't want to necessarily look at.
absolutely. Probably not in the far north, probably not too far in the desert towards the east. Probably none of the mountainous regions. And as Lunacy just found Rio Vista and the 84, it did pop up for a second on Solar's screen as well, but he didn't spot it. And with 15 seconds left, he's in the right area
Wow.
now.
Okay.
Nice 5k from Lunacy. And has he spotted Rio Vista? I think he has. Yeah, there we go. Okay, he's
Oh,
clicked.
there
That's
he
good for him. There we go. That'll do. It's 3 points dropped. Well, I say that'll do. I mean, Lunacy hasn't
Yeah,
dropped
I
any
was gonna
points
say.
yet, so
Hopefully, it doesn't come down to 3 points.
yeah, definitely true. But I mean, considering he had no clue where in California he was with about 15 seconds left, I mean, that's a well salvaged round, I suppose, from what could have been way worse.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think when the clock's running down and you're struggling to at least still find out where you're at, It's a very stressful position to be in, and to be able to at least locate the right area, and even if you're not pinpointing it, get it within 5 points is really, really helpful. And that's going to go, I think, a long way for the rest of the game.
Absolutely. So we've got 2 rounds to go. So let's start our penultimate round now. And well, I mean, maybe figuring out where they are might not be the most difficult thing with a Canadian flag right there. I mean, next to the German one. So who knows? Who knows what this could be?
Yeah, it doesn't quite look like Germany, but
You never know.
I
But
never know.
yeah, it shouldn't be with the landscape as well. It should be fairly doable in terms of like at least getting a rough region down, but pinpointing this could be quite tough, as this doesn't seem like the kind of road where you'll just have signs in abundance.
Agreed. At this point, the immediately what you're seeing is screaming Northern Canada somewhere, but that doesn't narrow it down really
Mm,
at all, because Northern Canada is a large area, and like you said, you can even get the road right. You can know what highway you're on and still have hundreds of kilometers in between you and the next town, and that can be a nightmare not only for pinpointing, but just trying to even figure out what province you're in,
yep.
let alone what part of the province itself you're in.
And they're again going the same direction. They've kind of been doing that a lot over the course of these 3Cs. So be interesting to see, because I think players generally do have a favored direction relating to kind of which direction they spawn looking at. Like, for example, I usually tend to go the opposite way of what I look at the start, because I'll just kind of like do a 180 to see what the other side looks at. And once I've turned around, I might as well then go that direction, because otherwise I just have to turn around again for no reason. So I usually,
Right.
yeah,
You don't want to take the risk and go one direction and find out after the fact that there was a clue right behind you immediately that you didn't see.
yeah. And Lunacy has spotted a service vehicle of some kind that mentioned Yukon. So he now does know the state, at least, as at some point Solar has also turned around and they're now going both the same way east. Because
Yeah,
of
and
course,
Solar passed the same truck, but I didn't see if he really caught the sign Yukon on
I
it.
don't think he did. Um, as Lunacy goes back to the start again, and I don't know. Maybe he set a checkpoint and tried to return to it and got that bug that placed him back at the start, because it looked a little bit like it, which is very unfortunate, because now I don't think he can actually make it to anything useful anymore in time. So he'll have to try to pinpoint with what he's got at the moment.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the clue Yukon, that helps a lot, but that doesn't that only does so much for you because it is a big province too. Now, thankfully, most of Yukon doesn't have a ton of coverage, so there is going to be a limited amount of roads it's going to be on, and you're on an east-west road, so you can at least hopefully get that down. One of the things we look at with Canada too is in terms of the vegetation and the topography. Generally speaking, the farther north you go, the shorter the trees are going to get as you start getting up into the tundra. But that again only helps you so much. It's helpful enough to tell you that maybe you're in Yukon, but beyond that, it isn't going to tell you a whole lot.
Yeah, and Solar just found a sign that mentioned kilometer 14 something 7 of the Alaskan Highway, which, as I found out when I was playing the seed, apparently means, not just Alaska, but goes through Yukon as well. So that narrows
Yeah,
it down
and
a little bit for him, at least.
well, I was gonna say, as we can see on Lunacy screen at the same time, he has the Alaska Highway there highlighted on his map, as you can see as he zooms in and out. So definitely, once you start looking at east-west highways in Yukon, it pops up pretty well. But the problem is, yeah, if you don't know already, it looks like Solar Sensei does have an idea of where Alaska Highway is going to be because he's zooming in on that area right away. It took a second, but starting to look for east-west parts of the road too.
Yeah, and there's not too much of them that go east-west. Still a sizable amount, but Lunacy getting within 200 meters. While Solar
Wow.
Sensei also getting the right highway, but unfortunately 66 kilometers off. A bit unfortunate there. But yeah, I guess a little bit unlucky for Lunacy as well. I mean, 172 meters is incredible, but on a different world map, that's within the 5K range. So a little bit unlucky to drop 1 point there. I'm sure if it won't come down to it, he won't mind. Although, again, I'm sure he would have also really liked the 25K. If for nothing else, then to sort of calm his nerves of, okay, with a 25K, you're not going to lose the game, especially with the speed that Lunacy has gone through some of the rounds. But if he's played first, And, as unreasonable as it seems from like an onlooker perspective of how difficult some of the rounds may be, there's always that lingering doubt in your mind. But he could 25k it. So you probably won't sleep well for a couple of days until your opponent plays the seed as well, and you know for sure. So in that kind of sense, definitely a little bit annoying that 1 point loss there. But considering how he pretty much had no real information beyond Yukon there, an incredible guess for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think when you're playing, you kind of have to assume your opponent's going to be getting 25Ks every time and kind of push yourself to that standard, especially with this particular seed when the first couple rounds have all been very doable, So you have to
Yeah.
assume, well, if I found it, well, surely my opponent did as well. And yeah, really impressive for both players to be able to get down at least to the highway they're on, and really good for Lunacy to be able to pin that down almost to a direct pinpoint. I think the advantage there definitely came down to having the extra time. It seemed like he had already had the opportunity to start looking around Yukon a bit sooner and start looking at the different options of what roads are going to be available and what matched up. Whereas Solarsensei probably got the better clue in the end with that sign with the Alaskan Highway, but just a little too late. Where I feel like with that information but more time, probably could have done the same thing and been able to narrow it down. So I think that probably was the difference in that case, but still very close, all things considered.
Yeah, so now we've got about, the distance of that round, so about 330 points, I think, between the two of them. And we're kind of in the same situation we've been in all three of these seeds now, with one more round to go and Solar having to make up a little bit of a disadvantage. But we are closer to South Africa in the points differential than we are to Lithuania, so we'll see. Nothing's lost yet as we get into round number 5 now. And I mean, it looks rural enough to potentially make a difference.
Okay, we've got some distinct looking power poles. I say distinct, but I'm not going to tell you
I
where
was,
they're
I
where they're
was, I
from.
was about to ask you.
It looked like if somebody knows that kind of thing, they'd be able to tell.
Presumably, yes.
Yeah,
But of course, in a game like this, it's not too relevant of information because you're assuming you're not going to be in a situation where that matters anyway.
exactly, exactly. So it's a pretty, rural area, but still not in the middle of nowhere. There's plenty of cars. There's plenty of infrastructure. Let's see if either of these players can come across something a little more useful in the next couple seconds here.
And they are going the same way again, so I feel like what I said earlier is kind of applying to these two, where they kind of tend to go the same way at the start.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to see the same kind of style play out on both of them and how much of that is. Oh, and there's some
Ooh.
proper signs. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and Solar
now,
Solar stopped just before he got to them, so he hasn't seen those signs and will try to go the opposite way. While Lunacy knows, okay, this is a good direction,
yeah,
and
we know we're in France now because we've got our little D signs and we've got our little towns.
yeah, and Lynx, or however it might be pronounced, Lynx, who knows, not your typical kind of French name. An X in there isn't really the kind of thing you'd usually see, so that kind of points you normally to a pretty far out there, I'm gonna call it, location. It could be either close to the Pyrenees, could also be potentially, close to some other areas that might have unique languages, like Brittany, which also has their unique language. Could be, I mean, I know it's not near the German border, but could also be there. You kind of have a lot to work with languages in France, as Lunacy has found the town, which.
Yeah, I think he must have been in the same mind because he went right to that southwestern part of the country and zoned in on that pretty quickly. What was a really nice clue that we saw is there was actually a nice, like, proper highway sign, which in
Mm.
France can be, oh, disappointingly rare. I think
Yeah.
everybody's familiar with the classic French situation where you have your local D highways, that don't really tell you as much as you really wish they would tell you.
Yep.
But having an actual A63 sign there was, I think, huge, and that helps a lot to be able to narrow that down. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Solar Sensei, saw that same clue initially and just never really got the opportunity to get there based on what we saw.
Yeah, really unfortunate there. Just turned around too quickly. And yeah, Lunacy will get another 5k. So finishes on 24,999. So we know now that 3 points in California was already enough to decide the game in Lunacy's favor, as Solar will finally also get to some signs. So he at least knows it's France now. I don't know if he's going to be super happy about that with 50 seconds remaining.
Yeah, that's the mixed emotions of I know where I am, and then the crestfallen realization that I don't know if I have enough time,
Yeah,
to be able to actually figure that out.
yeah, I don't really know where I am though.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, 30 seconds left to go. The signs weren't particularly useful. Again, you kind of have a little bit of the language impact there, but with 20 seconds to go, you have no idea how big that town is. That might be completely unfindable, might not even show up beyond some
Oh yeah,
POIs.
you could spend
So,
a lifetime looking through it to the try to find it. And this is a great example of what we were talking about before, where sometimes when you're deciding when is it time to turn around, right? Just a little bit farther. Do I turn around here? Is there a sign just around the corner? And
oh,
impressively though, Solarsensei has definitely recognized and realized that we're in Southwest France.
yep.
So even though the clock was running out, that was a really nice guess with the clock coming down to get it very close, but unfortunately not quite close enough.
Yeah, definitely just went the wrong direction there. But I mean, at least, to his credit, of course, he knew the right area based on the town signs. I imagine the name of the towns. And kind of as a positive, I guess, when you're in a round like that, at least it wasn't what it came down to. It's not like that was the deciding factor, and just because he's turned around a little too early, he missed out on a win. It was over before that anyway, so it's not a big deal to miss that last round by a little bit.
Yeah, no, agreed with that. Agreed with that. It's at least a little bit nicer of a way for it to fall where it didn't come down to, like you said, just not seeing a sign or not. There was at least some points to spare coming into it.
Yeah, so congratulations to Lunacy, who will, after I think 3 or 4 seasons in Reddit League. Now, let me I'll put up this screen again, and then I can actually look up when his first season was, because that's good information. His first season was in season 4. So yes, after 3 seasons of playing in Division 4, he's finally managed to get his promotion, and will be playing in Division 3 next season. Whereas Solarsensei, unfortunately for him, who started actually in the same season as Lunacy, will have to spend another season in Division 4. But yeah, he still can be happy about his season. He's had some great performances, just fell slightly short of the promotion in the end. I think it came down to like the last match day, I think, where he played against Pashtetli. And it was the direct matchup for that first place. And he lost that, and that was the deciding factor. So he came so close to it. And yeah, with a little bit more luck, a little bit, I guess, better performances in that one game. For next season, he's got a great chance to make that promotion happen next time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely heartbreaking to drop out of the spot on the final day and then lose by what was a really close game in the playoff match. But I think, Solar Sensei can be really proud of the performance this season. And certainly if he can replicate that same level that he's playing at now, I would assume I would expect him to be in the playoff promotion discussion, if not earning a direct spot next season. So I definitely think there's a lot of optimism there. And yeah, if he can replicate this, I would expect to see him in the mix, if not making it to Division 3 next time around. But congratulations to LunacyEcho. I mean, that was, I think, a really well earned performance. Definitely put in the work and definitely, I think, earned his spot for that promotion spot. So that'll be really exciting to see him up in Division 3 next season, and we'll see how well he'll do.
Absolutely. So that will do it for today. Thanks everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time. Until then, bye.
Bye, everyone.